Okay, so first of all, who is Digital River? We are one of the historic global e-commerce providers. We've been around in the scene since 21 years now. And we have thousands of clients from very small size to very large clients, global clients. You see some of the names over there. We operate pretty much helping our clients end-to-end to expand internationally and globally. We operate in 243 countries in the world. So in a way, we are very fortunate to have a very broad base that allows us to see what are the trends and the challenges that the clients face. And what is actually interesting is that for each and every client, and you will see some of the consideration in a minute, in reality, it doesn't really matter whether the client is a small one or a large one. It's always a journey, and it's always a journey that actually requires to discover things, to test things, and actually to plan very carefully what you actually want to do. So the first consideration is around the cost of entering in new countries. To deepen our understanding of how companies really view the global expansion, we commissioned last year to Forrest Research a study, and we asked them to interview 130 executives, mainly in the US and the UK, and to gather from them really what are the challenges that they normally face when they actually go abroad. And the things that actually came were not surprisingly related to many of the different important aspects. But there were also some few very interesting takeaways. For instance, everybody feels that it is very easy to support from an IT perspective point of view the commerce. Actually, it is to an extent. But when you start operating in certain countries, you need to make sure that you have everything needed to give a very high performance to the websites, backup capabilities, etc., etc. If you look at the legal challenges, we talked about some of my other speakers have talked about some of the taxation challenges. There is a lot of that, and actually, unfortunately, is not getting any easier. Even more recently, you might have heard that the European community has launched this European digital agenda, which is aimed to actually remove the barriers to cross-bordering, and that is actually absolutely positive. But on the other side, this also implies, as you might have seen, that the amount of controls and audits are actually going to increase. So you clearly can't get away anymore by not paying VAT or by assuming that you pay the VAT in the country where you operate and not in the country of destination. Interesting enough, out of these 130 clients which we interviewed, 62 reported that actually they have seen a significant increase in the audits by local government in regards to taxes in the countries where they operate. So it's actually a signal that as the economy is moving very fastly into online and e-commerce, clearly the attention by the government is significant and more up to the point of actually fining heavily when you are not compliant. The cultural barrier, I mean, long has been stated already around the cultural barrier, but I just wanted to bring an example here, which I think is very relevant. It happened to me yesterday. I was with one of our large global clients for a 3-day review, which we do on a quarterly basis of their business, and we were actually looking at how a very successful campaign to actually sell a high-end product converted very, very badly in France. And when we actually looked at that, we actually discovered two things. First of all, that the translation of the campaign in France wasn't really tagging very well. So practically, when you were Googling, you would end up on the US page rather than the French one. And you might say, well, easy to spot. Well, it is easy, but it actually points very clearly to the level of precision you need to actually have, even when you are a big retailer or or you have a big business online. The second one is that in the same campaign in a different country, this time was Spain, actually converted badly. It didn't convert badly in sales, but the problem was that the product sold was not the product that was in the promotion, which was actually a very high-end product and therefore very highly profitable. It actually converted very well for a lower consumer-based type of product that actually carried very, very low profit. And the reason for it is because the messages that actually were delivered within the country were not really resonating so well with the Spanish audience. Okay, so these are two very simple examples of the problems related to the commerce entry. And the other part is clearly that the investment that you need to make to draw the whole end-to-end experience for the client, as mentioned before, is very relevant, is very big. Second, capitalize on what you know. So this is a very interesting subject, again, drawing from real life. We are currently dealing with quite a number of large Asian global manufacturers of consumer electronics that have already established their presence in Europe, in US, etc. And most of them actually say, well, I want to actually re-establish a direct consumer channel, and I want to do it in Europe. And say, well, great. So where do you want to start? Well, why don't we start in Turkey and in Czech Republic and in Romania? And I say, well, interesting. Why do we want to start there? Well, we want to start there because we don't have any channel conflict. And I say, yeah, great, but what do you know about those markets? Nothing. Have you done any marketing? No. So clearly that is very bad, because the reality is that even if we can support the clients in those countries, the result will inevitably be relatively poor. And the problem is that if you really want to do a pilot and you want to convince your organization of the benefit of actually going online, you need to make sure that you start with something that actually drives the success. Everybody is really very enthused by going right away into China, into Brazil, into India, these are very huge and big markets. But you can't just go assuming that you have success. As Michel said before, if they don't know you, you probably won't be able to sell anyway. Third point. Be realistic about going from zero to revenue. Okay, everybody thinks, well, we can go there very quickly. So certainly that is true if things are properly done, but doing things properly require a lot of effort and a lot of investments. And still, even if you invest and put a lot of money into it, it still takes time, because the brand needs to get known, okay? And it's not that immediate to get the revenue. One example, again, from real life, a very large appliances manufacturer we are dealing with, probably one of the largest globally in the world. We started and did a pilot in Czech Republic. They were very comfortable about their presence and their brand. Still, however, they underestimated how really they could convert and actually penetrate the market with the product against the traditional local competition, etc. So clearly they had to reposition over and over to run campaigns to actually get the public and the client used to the website to navigate, to actually get the right level of information, and then to position the products. So all of that can take all the way up to 1 year prior to actually achieve the estimates. So being very realistic around the forecast, particularly for the first or second year, is as important as anything else. And lastly, if you are very serious about going globally, and this is not a sales pitch, but don't try to actually do everything in-house, because the barrier of entry in certain countries are very significant. Even in Europe, they are significant. Just think about handling the VAT. It requires, starting from January of this year, that you have the capability to remit a VAT in each and every country, which means fundamentally that you have some sort of a VAT registration in the countries, which means you need to have a bank account open in each country, which means you need to know all of the rules of the game to actually operate within the country. So it's not insignificant. Fraud is another huge part. So everybody says, well, fraud is there to stay. Well, fraud, unfortunately, is there to stay and there to grow. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago with Kaspersky, who was one of our global clients. They are technologically very, very innovative and extremely capable. They have actually identified and announced publicly 2 weeks ago that for the very first time in their 15 years of existence, they have been hacked. So someone has penetrated their network with a completely invisible hacking, code, which was residing in memory, etc. And they were looking for very determined and specific information. So think about the capability into e-commerce operation. It will mean that if you don't have the resiliency, the infrastructure to actually do it properly, not only you might suffer a fraud that takes away from your revenue and ultimately profit, but also exposes your client data to the risk of being hacked. And that is very, very damaging. So again, using partners that have the capability to guide you in whatever you want to pursue is very, very important, and I can't recommend it enough. Okay, so with that, I think I'm done. Thank you.